This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me, our Falcons analyst, Jarvis Davis, Locked On Falcons host, Aaron Freeman, and 11 Alive anchor, Maria Martin. The Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So legal tampering is set to begin soon. We'll talk about if the Falcons will pull the trigger or not. Also, there's a position that we've talked about over and over and over again about the first round, but what should the Falcons do in the second round and beyond? We'll talk about that as well. And in case the Falcons actually go with the player that Jarvis or Aaron or Maria want, which one is it at 15? We'll talk about that as well. And finally, there's a guy who might be switching area codes. We just don't know if he should switch into this area code. First things first, before we get into all that, we'll talk about a guy, Jarvis, that the Falcons may have to be prepared to lose. Reports are that the Falcons are bracing to lose Drew Dalman via free agency. We talked about that a little bit earlier in the week when we kind of broke down the combine and what we saw at each position for each position group, particularly the O-lineman. So now it really kind of is catching steam, that particular idea of losing Drew Dalman. He's projected to get 13 to 14 mil on a new deal somewhere out there in the pantheon of the NFL. But that said, is that or should that be too rich for the Falcons' blood?
Yeah, to be honest with you, yeah, man, because here's the thing, like there's a difference between being a really freaking good player and a player being a good fit for your team. And I think Drew Dalman falls into that good fit category because I feel like, there's a certain level of moments in this season where I said Drew Dalman was being outmatched, right? We didn't see it that much. It wasn't often, but I did see it a lot when you start talking about going up against playoff caliber teams, right? So that's for me, if you're going to be a playoff caliber team, those are some of the things that you need to watch out for when you're talking about, okay, can we give this guy 13 million? We were only prepared to pay maybe 9 or 10. So, but are we prepared to give him 13, 14? And if another team jumps in, are we willing to go up to 16, 17, maybe even 15, 16 or 17 million? So I feel like Drew Dalman is about to get ready to cash out. And I don't think that you need to get into a bidding war for Drew Dalman because he was just a good fit for your program.
Yeah. So here's a caveat that I'll throw out there to you, Jarvis, and Maria, Aaron. I want you guys to chime in as well when you talk about the Drew Dalman piece, because JD, you made a great point. It could be because of what the market is dictating, or rather you mentioned it could be where Drew falls because of his skill set, maybe relative to a guy like Creed Humphrey, who's really that free agent center that's kind of going to set the bar. But that said, is it more, Maria, about the market dictating what centers are going to be asking for? Or are the Falcons looking more at his skill set and saying, hey, we don't think that 13 or 14 mil is where we want to go?
Well, Creed Humphrey set the bar for what centers should be asking for. And the difference between Creed Humphrey and Drew Dalman, there are plenty, but I think one of them is, Creed Humphrey is a very well-known name in the NFL. And even though we all know Drew around here and he's great, and he turned out to be a 4th round pick that is phenomenal for your team, and the consistency aspect is great, and trying to keep your offensive line together for a quarterback that you need to work out, talking to the front office, all of those things are important. However, Drew Dalman isn't really that household name around the NFL. And it does have the market dictating that in some degree, especially because these centers that can play really good football, they don't come on the free agent market very often. And so for a guy like Drew, take advantage of that. You're about to make a lot of money. And I don't know that the Falcons are going to pay him probably what he's worth this time around in this free agent market. And he should capitalize on that. Look, he's only 26 years old. I think his best football is in front of him. And kind of like Jarvis was saying, his skill set really played into the Falcons' hand offensively, the last couple of years, and especially last year. They love the stretch play. That was their bread and butter. And his run blocking ability consistently graded out really, really high. Not that he's not a good pass blocker. It's just he was a tick lower than he was in the run blocking ability. So take the Texans, for example. They need a center. They need to restructure their offensive line. That's a team that can pay him probably what he's going to be looking for. I'm just not so sure the Falcons are going to do that. So all of these reports that they're bracing to lose him, I think Falcons fans should probably wrap their head around the fact that this is probably a real possibility.
Yeah, I think so as well, because when you kind of look at the top of the list, Aaron, you've got Creed Humphrey, you've got Frank Ragnow, and you've got Drew Dalman. So, and they're all kind of bunched together in age 25, 26, 28. So yeah, like Maria said, this is probably the time where Drew Dalman just has to think about Drew Dalman and the opportunity for him to strike while the iron is hot for him. So yeah, I agree with Maria. It's probably going to be more of what he's dictating or what's being dictated by the market, maybe even more so than his skill set. But for you, that said, and what you've seen, maybe not in free agency, but what you've maybe seen in the combine class, the upcoming draft class, would you say that this is maybe too rich for the Falcons' blood at 13, 14 mil?
Yeah, I think it is. I think ultimately the issue the Falcons are going to have to deal with in the decision to pay Drew Dalman, they have to ask themselves, what is stability on the offensive line worth to them? And whatever that number is, that's the money, that's the number that you're willing to offer Drew Dalman. And if he can get a better offer somewhere else, then, that's his prerogative to sort of take it. But when you look at this Falcons offensive line, you know Chris Lindstrom's going to be here for several more years, but the rest of the offensive line is a little bit more up in the air, right? Matthew Bergeron has 2 more years left on his rookie contract. And so you expect him to be the starting left guard for those years, but you do wonder a little bit whether or not Matthew Bergeron's we're going to be having this conversation in 2 years about Matthew Bergeron hitting the market and giving him a second contract and all those various things. And then the tackle position for the Atlanta Falcons, you have 2 30-plus-year-old offensive tackles. Caleb McGarry's going into a contract year. Jake Matthews has no more guaranteed money on his contract, so you can move off that contract at any point in the future. And so there's the potential for turnover on this offensive line over the next couple of seasons. And especially with the development of Michael Penix, you want to have stability up front. And so ultimately, I think the Falcons have to decide if Drew Dalman is worth that money. And if stability is worth 13 or 14 million, then the Falcons should pay it. For me, you mentioned the sort of top 2 guys that are the highest paid centers, Creed Humphrey, Frank Ragnow. That would put Drew Dalman in the top 3 if he gets 13 or 14 million.
Yep.
I like Drew Dalman. I think he's a good player. I don't think he's basically the 3rd best center in the NFC South. I think Graham Barton in Tampa Bay, as well as Eric McCoy in New Orleans, are better than him. And so it's tough to basically say you're the 3rd best center in the division, but let's make you the 3rd highest paid center in the entire NFL. And so I think with Drew Dalman, I think it's in his best interest to stay in Atlanta, just because as some of the things that Jarvis and Maria mentioned, that this scheme, I think, really accentuates his skill set. And so you're probably going to get a better version of Drew Dalman in this Falcons offense than you probably would in a different offense that may not be as reliant on the stretch play and the outside zone run scheme as the Falcons have been these last couple of years. But at the same time, as you mentioned, T, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for Drew Dalman. The offensive line market with Trey Smith likely being franchise tagged, he's going to be the top interior offensive lineman on the market. And so if he can cash in and get 14, 15 or more $1 million this offseason, he has every right to do so.
Yeah. And I mean, JD, we've seen the things that the Chicago Bears have done because they said, hey, we don't want Caleb Williams to fight for his life every snap next season. So they really are being very proactive and very aggressive in terms of stacking their O-line for him. And then, like Maria said, Drew Dalman, even though he may be mid in his own division, if you will, the fact that he missed the time that he missed last season with the ankle injury and was still able to finish 5th best in his grading for centers, that's probably what his agent's going to try to hang on. Now, Jarvis, the question becomes, is Terry Fontenot going to hang his hat on? But I got to have Drew Dalman, because if we're being honest, this is make or break for Terry Fontenot. And when you're kind of building your portfolio or you're building the case to be retained as a GM, you want as many of your draft picks as possible who've been successful to still be a part of that portfolio. So Jarvis, is that enough to maybe swing Terry Fontenot to aim high to get Drew Dalman? Or as you guys have all mentioned, is having Ryan Newsel in his back pocket and maybe someone on his radar from the combine enough to say, thank you for your services, sir?
You know what, T? I know I'm not supposed to answer a question with a question, but I'll throw a question right back at you. Are you willing to cut Grady Jarrett? Because you got to take money from somewhere if you're going to pay him that type of bread. Like, you have to take money from him if you're going to have to pay. You're going to try to pay him that type of money, right? Because we know that Dalman has suitors. And if you're talking about 13, 14, what if like Maria mentioned, what if the Texans jump in their case? Because they know they're trying to protect their investment in CJ Stroud too, right? So they might be willing to pay. Oh, y'all paying 13, 14? Oh, let's go to 16, 17. We'll throw a couple extra mil on there. We got salary cap space. We got room to maneuver. So my whole thing is, if you aren't willing to cut a guy like Grady, or say, hey, Caleb McGarrett, thank you for your services, sir. Like, the money has to kind of move around somewhere. You just can't keep adding on money when you have so many holes on that defensive side of the football. So you have to take from somewhere. It's going to have to be a give and take. You got to rob Peter to pay Paul in this particular situation. So, yeah, as much as I'm sure Terry Fontenot wanted to say, hey, I want to re-sign my guy, but, dude, you have to make some really tough decisions if you want to pay that type of money to Drew Dalman.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Jarvis here, just because this money isn't going to come out of thin air. And Terry Fontenot acquired a disaster of a situation when it came to the salary cap, got himself out of that. And now we're looking at another situation where they really don't have a lot of free money to play around with. So he is going to have to make some really tough decisions if he values that continuity on the offensive line that we're talking about. And that's going back to the Texans and CJ Stroud. They want to protect their investment. Michael Penix is an investment as well. They took a massive gamble to get him. And Free was talking about this. I was talking about this a little while ago. You know, this move has to pay off for the front office. If it doesn't, then they're really looking at, hey, I might not have a job anymore. Like, his whole future here in Atlanta, Terry Fontenot, rides on the fact that Michael Penix Jr. has to work out, because all these rumblings about Kirk Cousins potentially sitting there, that $10 million bonus is going to get paid. Let's say that does happen. He's sitting behind, he's sitting behind Michael Penix Jr. I mean, you're now talking about money having to be moved around elsewhere because of the choices that have been made in the past. So it's not going to come out of thin air. How much do you value continuity? That will be determined in what they do with Drew Dalman, loud and clear.
You know, Jarvis made a great point, Free. So I want you to wrap us up. I'm going to find a way in. I tried to find a way in Tenitra speak, but I couldn't. So I'm just going to say it the way Jarvis would say it. Does Terry Fontenot have enough moxie to nut cut when it comes to Grady Jarrett, if he has to do so, in order to keep a guy like Drew Dalman?
I mean, look, I love that Jarvis. I feel like my answer to this question is a personal attack on Terry Fontenot, so I have to dance around this.
That wasn't a personal attack. Just asking.
I mean,
rat topping up.
No, I don't think so. I think if you're going to cut Grady Jarrett, then you have, and I think we've discussed this before. It's like, you're going to cut Grady Jarrett, save $16 million. That's money that could be very useful for the Atlanta Falcons, the whole Kirk Cousins situation. Like, you need a win, and that's not a win if you cut Grady Jarrett. And so I think, like, you would really have to basically go out there next week, and the money that you save cutting Grady Jarrett, you got to make a big splash to make people forget about that. And I'm not expecting Terry and them to do that. So the answer to your question, T, is no. I do not think he has enough moxie to be able to pull that off if he winds up cutting Grady Jarrett.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think you make a great point there, Free, as well. If you do something like that, that would be such a game changer, not just to the organization, because we know what Grady Jarrett means to the organization, but also to the fans and then to the community of Atlanta overall. You better bring it. I mean, there better be some, and granted, Drew Dalman can be a part of that, but he cannot be the number one reason that you decided to let Grady Jarrett go. You would literally have to go out, and I know we're going to talk about this guy a little bit later, but you literally would have to go out and get somebody like a Joey Bosa, or last year, remember how we were just kind of playing around and having fun with like a Max Crosby, and obviously he's not available anymore, but my point being, you would have to do something like that, something that is like a franchise, not even a game-changing move, a franchise-changing move for you to part ways with a guy who at this moment is considered the franchise, because he's the guy that everybody looks to. When you think Falcons, you think Grady Jarrett, and I don't really think that that's the kind of move that Terry Fontenot would want to make or can make just to keep a Drew Dalman. I'm in agreement with you guys. I don't think it's going to happen, but we will see, because we're closer to it than we've been in some time. And that is the legal negotiation window in the NFL opening. So will they, or should they make a move? We'll talk about it on the other side. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. People who love using FanDuel's live betting feature do, because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. So whether you're backing a team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, never feel like you missed a chance. And the app is pretty easy to use. And when you win, you get paid instantly. So right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Maria, we're talking about moxie, nut cutting, or whatever other word we want to use on this show. About what mine. You're right. Jarvis's words, not mine, to be honest.
Miami. Yeah. It's me. I came over there, I came over that time.
Yeah, Terry. So go after him, not me. But the legal negotiating window in the NFL opens Monday, and free agency, of course, officially opens next Wednesday. But the question, Maria, is there a move, first off, that you believe the Falcons will make Monday?
What a great question. I'm so scarred by last year's free agent moves
yes.
that I think it's really difficult for me to answer this question. And to be fair, I feel like Terry Fontenot probably feels some semblance of that. They thought, and we all did on this podcast, we talked about it last year, we thought that some of the moves they made in free agency were franchise changing. Or at least defensive changing. We really did. And now we're sitting here and debating whether or not Justin Simmons should come back to the Falcons or go elsewhere. And Matthew Judon was a bust for the team. And perhaps that's defensive play calling, as Matthew Judon liked to say a couple of different times throughout the year. But regardless, a defensive changeover, you're now having a coordinator who's been very vocal about being versatile, having guys that can play multiple different positions. That sounds great, but where's that going to come from? I think for the Falcons, especially going back to my previous point, not having a ton of cash to play with, you're not going, I am hard pressed to believe that you're going to find some very splashy move by the Falcons this free agent market. However, I do think that they do have to be active in free agency. They have to, in order to make changes with this team. So perhaps go out, get a younger player, maybe not going to cost you, as much money as some of these splashier moves that you made last year that didn't pan out for you. Terry Fontenot's got some really tough decisions to make this offseason. And I think it's going to be hard to find these more profitable but less expensive free agents. And if he does, then great, a win for everybody.
Yeah. And what about you, Free? Now, it's what we believe. So is there a move you believe the Falcons will make Monday?
Sure. Let's say yes. I think, it's March, so free agency hasn't officially started, so we could be optimistic. We don't have to be knocked back down to being realistic and whatnot. So next Monday I'll be sitting here being like, why aren't the Falcons making a move? But like it's Thursday, right? We'll talk about this stuff. So
optimism, let's go.
Yes.
I feel like last offseason they made those moves early on with Kirk Cousins and Darnell Mooney and Charlie Warner to quote unquote revamp the offense, and I think they need to make a similar move this offseason with the defense. And the player that I would like to see them sign that I think could do that, he's not a household name, but I do think he's a player that is an up-and-coming player, is the Jets linebacker Jamien Sherwood, that can bring a lot of the skill set that the Falcons are looking for next to Caden Ellis that they were hoping Troy Anderson would provide, but Troy Anderson, due to his inability to stay healthy, hasn't been able to provide these last couple of years that sideline to sideline speed, coverage ability, being a downhill run thumper, being able to call the defense. That's something that Jamien Sherwood did this past year, stepping in for an injured CJ Mosley. And it's a similar sort of move, in my opinion, to a Caden Ellis signing that the Falcons had 2 years ago, where Caden Ellis was not a household name, played very well for the Saints the previous year, and the Falcons knew and thought that he would be able to pick up where he left off, and you've seen that the last 2 years. And I feel like Jamien Sherwood was quietly one of the best linebackers in the NFL this past season, being coached by Mike Rutenberg, the Jets linebackers coach, now the Falcons defensive passing game coordinator. Of course, Jeff Ulbrich now here as the Falcons new defensive coordinator. So I feel like the Falcons have an opportunity to lure someone like a Jamien Sherwood, who may not necessarily be a household name, but I think would be a very solid addition to the Falcons defense.
Yeah, Caden Ellis, Zach Bond. I wonder if there's anyone else in my old stomping grounds that maybe the Falcons can pick up and make special. But anyway, Jarvis, I like where Aaron was going with that. And again, this question is about what you believe the Falcons will do Monday. Is there a move you believe they'll make Monday?
Absolutely, 1,000%. Because what's the position that really on Jake's exceptional, right? Like that you can kind of get some good value. I believe that's the safety position, because unless you got a guy like Jordan, you can get away with paying guys, minimal money, and that's kind of where the Falcons are right now. They got to go blue lights in the basement shopping, right? So let's go to this safety spot, right? Let's look at some guys like a Chuck Clark, who played for the Jets, has some experience with Jeff Ulbrich as a defensive coordinator, and he ran into some little injury issues last year, and Ashton Davis kind of took over for him. He's a free agent as well, so there's a couple of names that have some familiarity with this coaching staff and the defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, who's just brought in. So I feel like safety is the spot that you need to take a look at, because what's really expensive, and it is the top two needs, and I'm going to go for this Falcons defense, that is edge rusher and corner. Those are stupid expensive. Even if you aren't that good, you can still get paid a lot of money if you hit the free agent market at that cornerback spot.
True.
Like you can get 10, 11, 12 million, like easily, not easily, but you feel what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If you had some good, starts under your belt for in the NFL. So I feel like going that safety route in the free agency, you can kind of go on the reduced meat aisle, right? Because I'm a super shopper on Kroger. You know what I'm saying? Like I go to Kroger, I go straight to that reduced meat section, because hey, you can find good value there. You know what I'm saying? Like groceries are expensive. Yes, I said groceries. Groceries are expensive now. So I go to the reduced meat aisle. Terry need to be right there next to me, trying to find a safety that can come in and play next to Jordan and have some and be productive. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, come on, let's go.
Low key, the K store does have like the best clear out.
That's true.
Yeah, like low key. Just saying. Yeah, for you, Maria. Now let's
you say that name issue. They can sponsor this show. You know
right. We need a new sponsor. But, Maria, like we were saying, now those are the things that you guys believe the Falcons will make moves towards Monday. But I'm going to ask you for your wish list, because like Aaron said, it's Thursday. So you get to wish whatever you want to. What do you want the Falcons to do come Monday, or once that free agency period opens? What do you really want them to do?
I want the Falcons to sign one of these cheaper guys that we're talking about and call it a reduced meat signing. Just kidding. Please don't do that.
On so many levels.
That's my wish list. I mean, I feel like that's a pretty good one.
We here, Maria. Let's go.
I was just trying to give you some kudos, Jarvis. Good job. Especially because yes, groceries are stupid expensive, just as free agent corners are stupid expensive. So are groceries right now. Yeah, but I think the free agent market, we've talked so much about the defensive side and the Falcons needing to address some of that stuff. And depending on how the draft is going to work out, obviously they have to address corner, and I think they need to do that through the draft and not through free agency because of the stupid expensive situation that we're talking about. But there are plenty of good free agents out there in the secondary, and you really need help there. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get creative for this Falcons team in order to make themselves better on the defensive side of the ball. So what I want them to do come Monday is I want to hear some young guy that can have an impact in the secondary, and he didn't cost you all that money. That is what I want. And we don't have to label it anything, but that's what I want to happen.
and Free, since it's Make-A-Wish Thursday, Free, what do you want to see the Falcons do in free agency?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about grocery. Like, clearly everybody expects the Falcons to be shopping for like ramen and Vienna sausages on the sort of the cheap aisle. But
this is a great
I would love the Falcons to, go dig through the cushions if we're going to keep this metaphor going, find some extra change. And you know what? Like, hey, I'm going to treat myself, and go out there and maybe, shop an aisle over and still try to get those discounts. But at the same time, like, spend some money. I would. Wait,
so you're not on the reduced meat aisle anymore? I'm confused.
No, I'm moving. I'm moving past reduced meat. I want that premium.
Go to the brisket. You go get some brisket.
I'm checking out the marbling and all that stuff on the meat aisle. But I want to be sitting here on this podcast on Locked On Sports Atlanta, Locked On Falcons, talking about the Falcons improving their roster. That's what I want to see. I want to be talking about how this defense is going to be so much better. We had that conversation 2 years ago when they went out and got Jesse Bates and David Onyemata and Caden Ellis and all those guys in that first week of free agency. And we're like, oh man, the Falcons are really making moves. They're spending money. This defense is going to be so much better. And you saw it reflected on the football field. I would love to be having that conversation again this time next week, but we'll see if the Falcons are ramen shopping or, they're going to splurge a little bit, rather than going to get the top Marushan at the grocery aisle, that they actually go to a nice little ramen shop and go, they got that 5-star, Yelp review or whatever. That's what I want to see from the Falcons rather than, the reduced meat aisle and whatnot.
It'd be nice. I love how optimistic you are, and I hope it happens.
Naively
I hope I can also understand whatever you just said. What did you say, Marush? Anyway.
Top ramen.
Top ramen.
I'm not paying for ramen. Sorry.
Yeah, I was about to say, personally, I've never done top ramen, but that's no shock to anybody. That's why I don't know what the heck Aaron's talking about. But I'm hoping that I mean, you already know that. I'm hoping that the Falcons will get that money from Big Mama's secret stash, if you know, you know, or under the mattress, also, if you know, you know, in free agency. Yes, sir, Jarvis, obviously. No. So, that said, like Maria said, this segment, top shelf. But we're also hoping, speaking of top shelf, that the Falcons will finally get themselves a top shelf edge rusher. So that said, do they have to stop at the first round in doing so? We'll talk about that on the other side. All right, Aaron, we're going to go back to our favorite topic in all the world, edge rusher. We talked about it ad nauseum, and we're going to keep talking about it until this draft actually happens. Obviously, that's the position the Falcons should prioritize in the first round, no doubt. But this is also a rich class of players who can affect the quarterback, who are on that defensive front. So let's take a look at the second round. What position for you makes the most sense to look at in the second round?
Well, I think Jarvis nailed it, where like you're looking at the two positions, those two premium positions of the defense side of the ball, edge rusher and cornerback. So if we're already scratching edge rusher off the list in round one, and we're checking that box, and of course the Falcons 100% will definitely take an edge rusher in the year 2025. It's not like we've been expecting this for like 12 years in a row. They will definitely do it this time. But if they do wind up doing the thing that we've been pushing for them to do for forever in round one, then I think cornerback is the natural place for you to go in round two. And it feels like people are liking more and more this cornerback class, and some of those guys, they're talking about like Travis Hunter and Will Johnson and Jahdae Barron and some of these guys in round 1. But I think a lot of people are looking at that sort of round 2 range where you can get a Maxwell Hairston of Kentucky, you can get a Trey Amos of Ole Miss, and some of these other guys that we saw at the Senior Bowl and elsewhere. That I think is going to be a deep enough class where you can probably sit there at pick 46 and feel like you're going to be able to get a guy that could come in and at the very least compete right away, potentially with Mike Hughes if the Falcons re-sign him in free agency, or come in right away and start for them at that cornerback spot.
Yeah, I think that's a great call. I think that as we've kind of gone on in this offseason, Jarvis, we've seen whether it's the combine, obviously we'll have pro days coming up, but even some of the bowls, we've seen those corners kind of increase their stock and make themselves a part of the conversation. So yeah, it's now being considered a deeper class than maybe we initially thought. So for you, would that be the direction you'd go in? Or is there another position that maybe makes more sense at the second round?
Second round, it has to be corner for me. Because like I said, you got to get young and cheap on this defensive side of the football. I'm sorry. I mean, as much as the idea of trading for Max Crosby, we threw that around. That was, man. Look, if the Falcons would have traded for Max Crosby, I don't know what I would have done on this podcast. I don't know. I don't know what I would have done.
We will never know. It would have never happened.
And we'll never know,
God.
right? So it would have been something very wild. I will say that. I would put my stamp on that aspect of it. But when you talk about trying to build something on defense, because that's what my heart, I have a soft side in my heart for the Falcons. I know a lot of y'all who listen to this show or watching this show don't believe that. But yeah, there's a soft part of me.
You're just jaded. It's okay.
Just jaded Jarvis, yeah.
I mean, I'm just jaded. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like Aaron mentioned, we've been pumping edge rusher for like the past 10 years. 12 years. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, here we are trying to, you have to get these young guys in here that can come in and make an immediate impact on defense. And like I said, I'm tired of spinning the wheel on the corner opposite of AJ Terrell. I'm tired of spinning that wheel. Every offseason. Who they gonna line up again? Opposite of AJ Terrell. Every year it happens. And I'm like, okay, get somebody in here that's young. I don't think Clark Phillips is that guy. Let me go ahead and say that. So get somebody in here that I know you can slot next to him and say, hey man, we're gonna get a little creative on this defense because we got some guys that can play press. We got some guys who can play zone as well. And we're gonna be able to mix it up a little bit so we can affect the quarterback.
Yeah, and you're right. It's been such a revolving door. There have been times where we've been encouraged, and then all of a sudden, and forgive me, I know Aaron and Jarvis will probably think about it right away because of the way his mind thinks. But I can think about a couple of years ago, the guy who we were super excited about, and after a couple of games, he went down for the season. And then, yes, thank you. Exactly. I was trying to remember his name, but yeah, that was one scenario where we were encouraged and it didn't happen. And then not that Mike Hughes isn't solid, but if you can get better, then get better. So I think that's the question, Maria, kind of for you, when you look at the second round and the opportunity that the Falcons have, where would you go as far as the position that makes the most sense?
There is no opportunity other than corner. I mean, I agree with both of them. You have to go corner in the second round because you have to go edge rusher in the first. Like there is no debating it at this point. And, I think the Falcons front office knows that. There's a reason why all 45 of their former interviews in Indianapolis at the Combine went to defensive players. This is one of the most defensive rich classes in terms of depth that we've seen in a while. And what a blessing, because we have talked on this podcast forever, and even beyond this podcast, 4 years, the better part of a decade, of getting better defensive help for the Falcons. And in order to do that, we've talked about this, you have to get it cheap, you have to get it young. And this is just an embarrassment of riches when it comes to this draft class and defensively. You really can't go wrong with a lot of the guys on the day one, day two guys, because even the guys that could have possibly snuck up there in the first round, but will slip to second day, had potential first round capabilities. But, the draft is going to dictate that with so many defensive players. A lot of the guys that'll be picked on day two could have easily been day one guys in another year. I think that you cannot go wrong in getting certain defensive players for not only being a starter, but also for depth on this team. What a great opportunity the Falcons have, even though they don't have as much draft capital this year as they would like. They could potentially get creative with that and add some more pieces to that. We can obviously talk about that another time, but I think if you don't go corner in the second round, you're doing yourself a disservice because of the corner class specifically, and because of just how many resources this draft class is giving you and handing to you on a silver platter. A lot of guys that are pretty raw coming out of college, especially in that corner class, but are athletic and have a lot of upside. So I think that there's a lot of very valuable options for the Falcons day 2 at corner.
And Maria, the only position that I wouldn't get mad about if they drafted in the second round is another edge rusher, because it's so deep.
Sure.
Somebody's going to fall.
Yeah,
and oh
no
my
doubt.
Lord. And oh my Lord. And oh my Lord. If Donovan Ezaraku is
Be
sitting
great.
right there at 46, if TF don't get that doggone card and run it up to that doggone podium, I'm gonna be like, TF is going on.
Yeah. Jarvis is reading my mind, because literally I was going to ask you guys about that second round and where else you would go. And I was going to say, if Terry Fontenot doesn't do it, then the TF stands for something else. So, I mean, he's just living rent free in my head right now.
Tired
Jarvis
of being blue, T. Tired of being blue.
Oh, Lord.
But I want to ask you guys this. I'm going to throw this out, and any and all three of you guys can answer the question, because the other piece I was thinking about is those scenarios that might actually dictate outside of what we've said. We know where the need is, and that's the next need is corner. But does a parting ways with Drew Dalman make you think differently about how you'd go about selecting in the second round, picking a player in the second round? Or what if they're able to actually get out there and make a trade that gets them some draft capital back, and they miraculously get back into the third round? How do those two scenarios possibly dictate what happens in the second round?
Wow. That would be very interesting if that were to happen, right? So if they were able to figure out a way to get a third round back, maybe even grab another fourth, because if the trade happens in the second round, if it's a guy that a team covets, they might be willing to throw a third and a fourth to get up to 46, right? So that kind of makes sense. Well, oh my gosh, if that were to happen, you know me, like there's some guys that are going to be available from an edge standpoint in those mid rounds as well. Those high mid rounds, like the third round, there are going to be some guys that can really come in and have an effect on whether or not this team gets to the playoffs. And if you see a second round level center, there's not many. I'm just gonna throw that out there. But if you see a second round, I can kind of be at ease just a little bit. If you get extra picks in those mid rounds, so you can continue to add to that edge rush room.
For me, I think if you do lose Drew Dalman, drafting a center certainly should be on the agenda. I would prefer, given you have a young quarterback, that the Falcons bring in maybe a cheaper veteran that has some starting experience to come in and compete with Ryan Newsel at that center spot, rather than relying on a rookie to have to hit the ground running right away. Because we've seen with basically the last 4 centers that the Falcons have drafted, whether we're talking about Drew Dalman or Matt Hennessy or Joe Hawley, going all the way back to like 2011 or 2010, like none of those guys were ready to come in and start right away in the NFL. And so I think there are centers in this draft class, like Gray Zabel of North Dakota State, that I think probably could pull it off, but he's making the transition from like tackle and guard to center. So it's not a guaranteed hit that he's going to be able to make that transition. So I do feel like center should be on the table in the draft, but I hope it's not such a priority that we have to get a guy in there in round 2 because we didn't go out there and sign, some veteran, that could in free agency to come in and compete with Ryan Newsel for that starting spot.
I'm with Free here. I think it is a big risk in order to really focus on a rookie center and hope that it pays off for you when it comes to Michael Penix Jr. He is your priority. Keeping him all together is your priority. Making sure he is successful is your priority. And I don't know that you can do that with a rookie center. I too would prefer someone who has experience in the NFL in this situation, and I'm sure Terry Fontenot would as well. The only thing that probably gives Terry Fontenot some semblance of confidence in this scenario is Drew Dalman and saying, I moved back to get him. And look at what happened with him. Now, granted, to Jarvis's point, he wasn't ready to jump in there at center right away,
Right.
but it did work out. The only difference is there is no time to let this evolve. You don't have a veteran quarterback out there. He's got some games under him now, but he's not a veteran by any stretch of the imagination. And some people may say, well, Kirk Cousins may be mentoring him. Let me tell you right now, if it does end up working out where these whispers of Kirk Cousins remaining on the roster happens, Kirk's professional. We all know that, right? And he's been very good with Michael Penix. That is going to create a dynamic nobody wants in the locker room. I will tell you that right now. No matter how professional you are, Kirk Cousins, we all know he's great. He's still human at the end of the day. That is going to suck for all parties involved. And Josh Kendall came on Sports Extra on this past Sunday on my show, and he made a really good point. Michael Penix, let's say he goes down, God forbid, right? He gets injured. Here comes Kirk Cousins. It is going to be a very rough dynamic that nobody wants to see happen. So you really need to protect Michael Penix Jr. at all costs, and that means trying to figure out the center, in my opinion, another way than the draft, even though, it doesn't help or it doesn't hurt you if there is a good center out there later, only if you can get more draft capital. That is the only caveat. If you can get some more draft capital, I'm slightly more okay with it than not, but if you're sticking there with the picks that you have, I would say to shy away from that.
Yeah, and I can see that scenario happening where somehow, some way, Terry Fontenot, maybe even before the draft begins, gets some more draft capital, and that might give him a little bit more edge and wiggle room. Speaking of edge, maybe at 15, there are going to be some guys that are right down the road that the Falcons can actually consider, but which one will they actually go for? We'll talk about that on the other side. This episode of our Atlanta football party is brought to you by FanDuel. So think about this. When you think about the NBA season that is just now starting to kick off, right? It's a great opportunity for you, if you're that person, to want to bet, because FanDuel right now has some great opportunities where you can get $150. Now, the guys and gals have all talked about this on the show today and how this is that time where groceries are ridiculously high. That's why you might want to check out FanDuel. Why? Because it's also the number one sports betting partner of the NBA. And also you can use your app. So if you're like me and you do a lot of things on your phone these days, then absolutely having an app that is user-friendly like the FanDuel app would be a good look for you. And think about this as well. At the end of a game, you might be looking for that player who actually hits the clutch three, or you might be looking for the fourth quarter comeback, like maybe we'll see with the Hawks tonight. If you do, then maybe you can get that $150 in bonus bets, of course, if your first $5 bet wins. So how can you do this? Visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. And don't forget about that live betting feature, because it keeps every moment of a game exciting. So go to FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets, because FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So Jarvis, Jalon Walker will not participate in Pro Day on March 12th, which of course is next Wednesday, because of a quad strain he suffered during training, according to ESPN sources. But Walker will have a private workout for NFL teams on April 17th. So when you look at what Jalon Walker brings to the table, do you feel like he'd be a good fit for the Falcons?
Yes, Lord. Yes, absolutely. Because here's
Jarvis goes to his happy place.
Yes, I'm going to my happy place right now. I don't know if you guys understand where I'm. I want you to feel me when I say this. If you have any questions about what Jalon Walker will bring to the table, because he has the traits to do it, I think this from the explosiveness, to be able to track down quarterbacks if they're in the open field, make them look slow. He made Arch Manning look really slow, talking about a perfect angle and just bringing them down, just like sucking them up like a vacuum cleaner, right? The dude has all the skill sets and the traits to be an effective linebacker. Like if you want to line them up on the edge, you can have them stand up. And here's the thing. Jalon Walker is the guy that, came with you on when you needed him the most. At Texas, that man came up with 3 sacks and he was dominating that game. And those are the type of players that you need on this Falcons roster, because we talk about Jake Matthews earlier in his contract and having no guaranteed money. Grady Jarrett, you can cut him and save $16 million against the cap. Guess what? K-Nell's going into his contract is up pretty soon too. So if you are talking about building something on defense, getting young and cheap on defense, and you're talking about a comparable level, if not better from a talent standpoint, I feel like you have to almost take a guy like Jalon Walker, because he's a guy that can be a game changer for you.
So, Maria, if you agree that Jalon Walker could potentially be a good fit for the Falcons, do you think that Jeff Ulbrich will be able to truly maximize Walker's talent?
First, let me tell you, I have confirmed that he will not be at Pro Day. He will not be there, but he will do this private workout. Second of all, 100%, with every bit of confidence that I have in my body, do I believe that Jeff Ulbrich can have success with Jalon Walker. I covered Jalon when he was in college. Have a great relationship with Jalon. I think he's a tremendous human being. And aside from the football piece, one of the big caveats for the Falcons has always been ethos. And is it a player that fits our locker room? And is it a good person? And all of those things, which to me, like, that shouldn't be the end all be all in the NFL, which I get it. That's just kind of how the business works. There are some players out there that have issues and they're really good on the field. But Jalon doesn't have either one of those things. He's such a good kid. He comes from a coaching background. His dad's a coach. He played multiple different positions in high school, and he can fit multiple different positions on the defensive side of the football. What the Falcons have failed to understand since Terry Fontenot has been the general manager is drafting a player from Georgia on the defensive side of the football will pay dividends like you wouldn't believe. Just ask the Eagles. We've talked about this many times. Kirby Smart has such a knack at making defenders versatile in a way that other people are not doing in college football. And I really do believe that. And Jalon Walker, though a lot of people are turned off by his size because he's a little smaller than you probably prefer for a true edge rusher in the NFL, I would encourage people to not shy away from that. He can do anything you want him to do. When he says, I enjoy being that chess piece, I enjoy moving around and being versatile and being able to change alignment, which he does very well, that should excite a lot of people and a lot of scouts and a lot of front office people. Now, the fact that he did get this tweak of an injury in training, which is not going to be an issue down the road, I believe, that pays off for the Falcons big time, because he will probably start sliding a little bit. People are going to say, oh, like, what does this mean? Well, it means he could be available at 15. I didn't think he would be, to be honest. And this is why I think I said this last week. Like, I didn't think Jalon Walker would be available at 15. Now, because of this injury, it's possible. I think what Jalon Walker brings you is immediate pass rush help. And I also think that his best football is still ahead of him. So it's a quick pass rush help from Jalon, but also Jeff Ulbrich, what he was saying in his opening press conference should have people salivating over the idea of Jalon Walker. This is the exact player he described in his opening press conference. This would be a slam dunk for the Falcons. I hope it happens. I don't like to get my hopes up when it comes to the draft, but it would be phenomenal for all parties involved. I'm sorry. I know. I'm not pessimistic. I'm not a pessimistic person, but I feel like
you're realist.
I'm in the middle. I've been jaded. I'm jaded Jarvis when it comes to the draft. So,
we're perfectly aligned, Maria, because we have happy, joy in Free. We have
for now
grumpy in JD, and then
I'm in the middle.
Exactly. We have the person who who absolutely
Middle Maria.
It's
Middle Maria, baby.
It's okay. It's okay. All right, guys. This is actually a question for all three of you, starting with Free, JD, and then Maria. Wrap us up with this one. When you look at Jalon Walker and a Mikel Williams who might be sitting there at 15 as well on draft night, night one, who would be the better fit for the Falcons? Free, starting with you, Mikel or Jalon?
I think when you're asking who's the better football player right now, Jalon Walker is the better football player. But I think for the Falcons, with a guy needing that edge rusher, I lean a little bit more Mikel Williams, just because I think that my issue with Jalon Walker, again, he's a heck of a football player, but you need to have a plan for him. We've seen guys that are these versatile chess pieces in college, and then they get to the pros, and teams are like, we'll figure it out. And I think of a team like the Arizona Cardinals, who drafted Hassan Reddick, who drafted Isaiah Simmons, who drafted Zaven Collins, and they didn't have a plan for those guys, and you saw those guys languish in those situations. And so I think with Mikel Williams, it's like, hey, put your hand in dirt and get off the ball. But with Jalon Walker, there's a little bit more to it in terms of what his future is going to look like.
Yeah. I mean, Aaron made a really good case for Mikel Williams. But y'all know how there's a little like there's a little side right next to my Falcons soft side. There's a Mikel, broke my heart side, right? Dog, like there was too many times for me where I was like, all right, this is the game. This is the moment, the Mikel moment that he has the opportunity to really solidify himself as one of those guys. And I felt like there were too many times where he did not do that. That's why I point to the game at Texas, even in the SEC championship. Jalon Walker still was productive against Texas. So when you think about those two aspects, those games, right? How big those games are, how so much hype coming in, and then you turn to 11, and say, hey, make a play for us, take over the game. And you're like, all right, don't worry about it. I got you. And I even said this too throughout Jalon Walker's career. I said the dude is going to make his money rushing the passer. But, Kirby said he had a plan. Like Free said, Kirby had a plan for him. He said, hey, man, we're going to put you at stand-up linebacker. This is where we feel you need to be, and we'll use you in spots, lining up off the edge. I feel like Jalon is the guy that can make it money right there, rushing the passer, getting after it. And then if you want to use him as a stand-up, that's totally fine. But he's going to make his money in the NFL rushing the passer.
Can I go Middle Maria again? I don't really think you can go wrong. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of these players. And I watched them at close range for their entire time at Georgia. There is differences in that, to Free's point, Mikel may be a little bit more finessed, I guess I should say, right now at the edge rusher position. But Jalon Walker's coming out party was that Texas game that Jarvis keeps referring to. And Mikel said in Indianapolis, this is the healthiest I've been all year. He was playing through an undisclosed ankle sprain that nobody knew about. And so that kind of intrigues some people. Like, you put some really good tape together and you were like, what, 75%? Like, there's more to get with that. But let me remind you, Mikel does have an injury history that is slightly concerning. He has the size that you're missing from Jalon Walker. He's a really good run defender already, which that's awesome. Plug and play him there. But even though Jalon is very vocal about being this chess piece and being moved around and all those things, Mikel can do the same thing. Like, he can play multiple positions. And I think that's just what comes with playing on Kirby Smart's defense. He asks that a lot of especially these edge rushers. He wants them to be versatile, and really that can only help them when it comes to the NFL and what coaches are asking him to do. But Jalon has said multiple times that the conversations that he's had with NFL franchises so far, all of them see him playing multiple roles within the defense. And so that is their plan for him. I'm sure Jeff Ulbrich would say the exact same thing for Jalon. But truly, I don't think you can go wrong with either player. I have a hard time believing that Mikel Williams will be there at 15. But if he is, that's going to be tough for the Falcons. It'll be a tough decision.
Yeah, they've got some tough decisions to make about those two guys potentially, and some tough decisions to make about the type of player that makes sense for the Falcons overall. We'll talk about that on the other side. So, Jarvis, a 5-time Pro Bowler, looks like he's going to have a new zip code this coming season. Joey Bosa was set to make a roster bonus for $12.3 million when the new league year starts, but the Chargers decided to release that 5-time Pro Bowler. So does this type of player, a Joey Bosa type of player, make sense for the Falcons?
Let's see if anybody listens. Hell yeah, that makes sense.
I
you know. So, but the thing about it is, like, and I'm doing exactly what I don't like, because it seems like every player that comes available, Falcons Twitter, Falcons Nation, bring him in. I'm like,
what do he look like in a Falcons uniform?
I'm just like, all right, man, calm down. Like, no, they don't need another wide DK Metcalf. Like, why would they bring in another wide receiver? Anyway, you know what I'm saying? But when you talk about the type of player, I love the way you phrase this question. The type of player is, yes, absolutely. If you can get a guy that has a little injury history, so he may or may not, his market might not be as fruitful as everybody might believe.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He's been in the league for quite some time. I didn't even know he was in the game from time to time when the Falcons played the Chargers. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm Terry, I play that up. I engage. I'm like, hey, man, we might be able to get about 10 mil, you know what I'm saying? 1 year prove it deal, bro. Let's go see what make it happen. You know, let's see what happens, you know, and then let's revisit once we get this Kirk Cousins situation straightened out. Let's revisit. Maybe give me a 2 or 3 year deal, maybe a 25 mil or so, you know, we see what's going on. So yeah, this is definitely the type of player they might need to at least engage. They need to engage, right?
Right. Well, Maria, Jarvis mentioned a great point as to why he might be the most viable. And if nothing else, the Falcons have become known for being that team where you go with that 1 year prove it deal. So I don't know, maybe a Joey Bosa or a Joey Bosa type of player might just fit.
Yeah, look, I'm with you. It would be great to have somebody like that on the Falcons.
Amazing.
I don't think that's gonna happen. I really don't. And I think one thing, Jarvis mentions, maybe the market isn't going to be as profitable or intriguing for him. I tend to disagree. I think there's going to be a run on Joey Bosa, and I don't think the Falcons can compete on that run. And the injury history should make you a little bit nervous, because you already have, like, remember last year in training camp when we were talking about who is the most like complete group right now? Who is the group with the biggest upside? And we're like, linebackers, duh. They look awesome. Whatever. We were so excited about the linebacking core, and then Troy Anderson can't keep playing. He's always out. And so do you entertain another player who has something like that? Now, granted, these are two very different people, and you have someone who continues to end up in Orlando pretty much all the time. I find it hard to believe that the Falcons are going to make a run on Joey Bosa. It was fun to entertain guys like Max Crosby and Joey Bosa. I love Falcons fans for that, and the energy behind some of these free agents that are very big names. But I don't see Joey Bosa in a Falcons uniform.
Aaron,
Atlanta might not be the space for Joey either. Just throwing it out there as well.
I wasn't going to go there. I was just going to keep it middle Maria and just let it.
You don't have to. I can. I'm more than willing to go there, but
all right,
just throwing it out there. Yeah.
What did you throw? I'm sorry. Would you throw?
Huh?
What did you say? I didn't hear you.
No, I was just saying. I said I'm more than willing to go there, but we don't have to. Got it. I got that's a whole nother show, and I think that's a whole nother genre.
Long conversation.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, let's keep it playing.
It's your turn to get us back on the rails in this last 90 seconds. So please get us back on the rails so we can ride out like the professional show that we are. Although free agency starts Wednesday, Bosa doesn't have to actually wait until then to sign a team because he was released. He can actually sign today. Should the Falcons be that team signing him today?
No, I don't think so. I feel like, Joey Bosa is still a good football player, but he's not the sort of dominant pass rusher that he once was. So you're catching him on the downward slope of his career at this point, and a lot of that is owed to what Maria's talking about with his injury history. He just hasn't really been able to stay healthy the last couple of years. And it would, in a situation where I think if the Falcons were coming off a playoff year and they were just looking for that to get him to the next level, we would be having a very different conversation about renting Joey Bosa as a mercenary this year to get this team over the hump. But they kind of, as Jarvis said earlier, they kind of need to go younger. They've been there, done that. It's not the same as the Judon situation, but it's not that far removed from taking on an older player that you're just hoping to maximize, these last couple of years. So I feel like pass on Joey Bosa. He'll probably wind up staying out there on the West Coast and play with his brother in San Francisco. And then we'll be sitting here later this season when we have to play the 49ers and being like, man, why did we not sign this guy? Because he's terrorizing his offensive line. But like for now, I think in March, you can probably at least convince yourself, hey, there are greener pastures here. And then maybe by the time we get to November, we'll be like, oh yeah, we probably should have at least tried to sign him just to prevent him from going to the 49ers.
Well, actually, you just hope you get the 49ers later in the season because, yeah, they are his number one suitors. But if you get him later in the season, that'll be a good look because, like you guys said, thigh hamstring strain, hand finger dislocation, cervical neck strain, pedal foot bruise, and that was all in one season in 2018. I don't even have to read the rest of what has happened to Joey Bosa the 6 years after that. So I think you make a good point about him not necessarily being someone the Falcons want to take a risk on. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by Locked On Falcons with your host Aaron Freeman as your second listen, and check out Maria Martin, host of Sports Extra on Sundays on 11 Alive. And of course, we will see you next week, all primed and ready to talk about open season, also known as free agency.